On the night of March 31st, 1922, 6 people were murdered on an isolated farm in Bavaria. All 6 it struck down with a mattock, a farm tool used to dig. But the killer didn't run. For the next 3 days, someone stayed on that farm with the bodies. They lit the fire. They fed the livestock. They cooked meals in the kitchen, just feet from the dead. Neighbors saw smoke from the chimney and thought nothing of it. To this day, nobody knows who that person was. The farm was called Hinterkaifeck, a small remote homestead about 40 miles north of Munich, cut off from its nearest village by a stretch of forest. It was home to Andreas Gruber, 63, his wife Kazilia, 72, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, 35, and her 2 children, 7-year-old Kazilia and 2-year-old Joseph. Andreas had a reputation in the area. Strict, difficult, and by more than one account, the father of his own grandson. The family kept mostly to themselves. Isolation was the point. It was also, in the end, the problem. In the months before the murders, strange things started happening. The family's maid quit abruptly, telling neighbors she'd heard footsteps in the attic at night. Footsteps with no source, in a house where everyone was already accounted for. She said the house felt haunted. Then, just days before the killings, Andreas told a neighbor he'd found a set of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the edge of the forest straight to the farmhouse. No footprints led back out. A set of house keys went missing around the same time. Andreas searched the attic and the outbuildings. He found nothing. On March 31st, a new maid arrived at the farm. 44-year-old Maria Baumgartner, hired to replace the one who had quit. It was her first day. That evening, all 6 residents of Hinterkaifeck, the Grubers, Victoria, her 2 children, and Maria, sat down for what would be their last meal together. A newspaper Andreas hadn't purchased was later found inside the house, its origin never explained. Whoever left it there had already been inside, watching, waiting, long before that night. Nobody knows exactly what happened that night. There was no scream anyone remembered, no struggle heard by neighbors more than a few hundred meters away. One by one, it seems, each member of the household was lured or led out to the barn and killed there with the mattock, the same tool used to break frozen ground. Little Kazilia, 7 years old, was found with clumps of her own hair torn out, suggesting she may have survived the initial attack only to wake up beside her murdered family, still in the barn, in the dark. For days, nobody came looking. The family kept to themselves, so their absence from church and from the village raised no immediate alarm. But smoke was still rising from the farmhouse chimney. Someone was still inside. That someone ate the family's food, fed their cows and horses, kept the fire burning in the hearth where the Grubers used to sit. Whether it was the killer alone or the killer returning again and again, no one has ever been able to say. For 3 full days, Hinterkaifeck looked from the outside like nothing was wrong at all. On April 4th, neighbors grew concerned enough to check. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a local farmer who had once been romantically involved with Victoria and was rumored to be Joseph's real father, went to the property with 2 other men. In the barn, they found the 4 adult and older child bodies stacked together beneath a layer of hay, as if someone had tried, half-heartedly, to hide them. Inside the house, they found Maria the maid, murdered in her bed, and finally, 2-year-old Joseph, killed in his crib, on his first and only night at Hinterkaifeck under Maria's care. Word spread fast, and so did the crowds. Within hours, dozens of neighbors, journalists, and curious onlookers had walked freely through the crime scene, touching the bodies, moving evidence, even taking souvenirs before police from Munich arrived. By the time lead investigator Georg Reingruber reached the farm, any footprints, fingerprints, or physical clues that might have identified the killer had already been trampled into the mud by well-meaning strangers. Modern forensics never got a real chance. The case was, in a sense, contaminated before it had truly begun. Investigators questioned more than 100 people over the following years. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, The man who found the bodies, and possibly Yosef's biological father, became an early and lasting suspect. He'd behaved strangely at the scene, reportedly handling evidence and making comments that struck investigators as odd for a man who'd just discovered 6 murdered neighbors. He was tried twice for the killings. Both times, the case against him fell apart in court. No physical evidence ever tied him, or anyone else, conclusively to the mattock in the barn loft. Other theories emerged over the decades. Some pointed to a mysterious drifter named Carl Gabriel, Victoria's officially deceased husband, suggesting he'd faked his own death years earlier and returned in secret, enraged by his wife's affair. Others focused on a German immigrant named Paul Müller, who is believed to have committed similar unsolved farmhouse murders in the United States before vanishing and possibly resurfacing in Bavaria around 1922. None of these theories were ever proven. Each one explained a piece of the case. None of them explained all of it. In 2007, criminology students at a police academy near Munich reopened the case as a training exercise, applying a century of advances in forensic science to the original evidence. Using modern profiling and analysis, they narrowed the list of suspects down to a single name, but they chose never to release it publicly. Out of respect, they said, for the suspect's surviving descendants, who still live in the region today. The Academy confirmed they had an answer. They just never told anyone what it was. The Hinterkaifeck farmhouse itself was torn down in 1923, its timbers reportedly burned or scattered, as if the village wanted the place itself erased along with the crime. Today, only a small memorial cross marks where the farm once stood, deep in the Bavarian countryside. Tour groups and true crime pilgrims still visit. Locals still tell the story the way it was told to them. Footsteps in the attic, footprints with no return, a killer who stayed and lit the fire. More than a century later, DNA testing has been attempted on remains and evidence connected to the case, though results have been inconclusive due to decades of contamination and improper storage. Genealogists and amateur investigators continue combing through parish records and family trees, chasing the same handful of names, Schlittenbauer, Gabriel, Müller, hoping modern science might finally succeed where 1920s police work failed. So far, Hinterkaifeck has outlasted every new technique thrown at it. 100 years on, Hinterkaifeck remains Germany's most enduring unsolved murder case. 6 people dead, a killer who stayed behind for days without ever being seen, and a 2007 investigation that ended not with an arrest, but with a name nobody would say out loud. Was it a jealous lover? A vanished husband seeking revenge? A wandering killer who simply moved on to the next isolated farm? Whoever it was walked away and was never seen again. What do you think really happened at Hinterkaifeck? Some doors, once closed, never open again.